The Catcher in the Rye, written by J.D. Salinger and first published in 1951, is a classic of modern American literature that captures the alienation and angst of adolescence. The novel follows the story of Holden Caulfield, a 16-year-old boy who has been expelled from his prep school and spends several days wandering around New York City. Told in a first-person narrative, Holden's voice is distinctively cynical and reflective, revealing his internal struggles with identity, growing up, and his place in a world he perceives as phony. The novel is noted for its stream of consciousness style, where Holden's thoughts flow freely and often erratically, providing insight into his emotional state. The Catcher in the Rye deals with themes of innocence, rebellion, depression, and the quest for meaning in an indifferent world. It resonates with readers who have experienced the confusion and turbulence of youth, and has sparked debates about its portrayal of alienation and rebellion against societal norms. Holden's expulsion from Pensy Prep. The novel begins with Holden Caulfield speaking directly to the reader, narrating the events that have recently transpired. He begins by mentioning that he has been expelled from Pensy Prep, a prestigious boarding school, for failing 4 of his subjects. Holden's academic struggles are symptomatic of his broader disconnection from the structures of authority and conformity that he so deeply resents. His dismissal from Pensy is not the first time he has been expelled. It's part of a pattern in Holden's life. As he packs his bags to leave Pensy, Holden feels a mixture of apathy, anger, and sadness. He describes his interactions with his classmates and teachers with disdain, referring to them as phony. His relationship with his roommate, Stradlater, is particularly strained, especially after Stradlater goes on a date with Jane Gallagher, a girl Holden has deep feelings for. This encounter leaves Holden feeling increasingly frustrated and isolated, leading to a physical altercation with Stradlater. Rather than stay for the few remaining days before his scheduled departure, Holden decides to leave Pensy early and head to New York City. Wandering around New York. Once in New York, Holden checks into the dilapidated Edmont Hotel, where he begins a series of aimless wanderings around the city. His experiences in New York are marked by a series of disjointed and often unsettling encounters, which reflect his deepening sense of alienation. Throughout these episodes, Holden's internal monologue reveals his longing for genuine connection, even as he continually pushes people away. One of his first stops is a nightclub called the Lavender Room, where he tries to engage in conversation with 3 older women. He finds their superficiality intolerable and becomes increasingly disillusioned by the casual cruelty and insincerity he perceives in the world around him. This pattern of failed interactions repeats itself throughout his time in New York. For example, he later hires a prostitute, not out of sexual desire, but from a desire for companionship, only to feel repulsed and saddened by the encounter. Holden's interactions with people reveal his deep-seated fears of adulthood and growing up. He is repulsed by the sexual and moral corruption he associates with adulthood, and his isolation grows as he struggles to reconcile his idealized views of innocence with the realities of the world around him. Holden's memories of childhood. As Holden wanders the city, he often reflects on his past, particularly on his younger brother, Ali, who died of leukemia. Ali's death has had a profound and lasting impact on Holden, and his grief manifests in a number of ways throughout the novel. Holden idealizes Ali as a symbol of purity and innocence, and his death represents a loss of these qualities in Holden's life. The red hunting hat that Holden frequently wears is a physical reminder of his connection to Ali, serving as a kind of protective talisman that shields him from the harshness of the adult world. Holden also recalls his close relationship with Jane Gallagher, whom he associates with the innocence and authenticity of his childhood. He remembers playing checkers with her, and he fixates on the fact that she would never move her kings from the back row, a detail that symbolizes her preservation of innocence. Jane is one of the few people Holden doesn't see as phony, and his inability to reconnect with her in the present is emblematic of his larger struggle to hold onto the past. The museum and the ducks. A key motif in The Catcher in the Rye is Holden's visit to the Museum of Natural History, a place he remembers fondly from his childhood. The museum represents a world of permanence and predictability, where everything remains frozen in time. Holden is comforted by the idea that the exhibits never change, and his visit to the museum symbolizes his desire to stop time and prevent the inevitable process of growing up. His fixation on the unchanging displays is a reflection of his fear of change and his inability to cope with the fluidity of life. Another recurring motif is Holden's concern with the ducks in Central Park. He repeatedly asks cab drivers where the ducks go in the winter, reflecting his preoccupation with displacement and the unknown. The question of the duck's fate mirrors Holden's own sense of uncertainty and his fear of the future. He feels lost and adrift, much like the ducks, and his search for answers reflects his deeper quest for meaning in a world that seems indifferent to his struggles. Phoebe and the Catcher in the Rye. The most significant relationship in Holden's life is with his younger sister, Phoebe. After spending several days in New York, Holden sneaks into his family's apartment to see Phoebe. She is one of the few people he feels he can truly connect with, and their conversations reveal a deep bond between the siblings. Phoebe is perceptive and intelligent beyond her years, and her concern for Holden's well-being is one of the few sources of comfort in his life. It is during this visit that Holden expresses his fantasy of becoming the catcher in the rye. He tells Phoebe that he imagines himself standing in a field of rye near a cliff where he catches children who are running toward the edge, preventing them from falling into the abyss. This image represents Holden's desire to protect the innocence of children and prevent them from experiencing the corruption and pain he associates with adulthood. The catcher in the rye metaphor is central to Holden's character, encapsulating his deep-seated fear of growing up and his longing to preserve purity and innocence in a world that he views as corrupt and phony. Holden's breakdown in the carousel. After leaving Phoebe, Holden's emotional and psychological state deteriorates further. He becomes increasingly paranoid and anxious, culminating in a nervous breakdown. He decides to leave New York and run away, hoping to escape the pressures of his life. However, Phoebe insists on coming with him, which forces Holden to reconsider his plans. In the final scenes of the novel, Holden takes Phoebe to the zoo and watches her ride a carousel. This moment is one of the few times in the novel where Holden experiences a sense of peace and happiness. As he watches Phoebe ride the carousel, he begins to accept that he cannot prevent her or anyone else from growing up. The carousel, which goes around in circles but never progresses, symbolizes the cyclical nature of life. Holden realizes that while he cannot stop the passage of time or protect others from the challenges of adulthood, there is still joy to be found in the present moment. Holden's institutionalization. The novel concludes with Holden in a mental institution, where he is being treated for his breakdown. He speaks directly to the reader, reflecting on the events of the past and expressing some degree of ambivalence about his future. While he is still uncertain about what will come next, there is a sense that Holden is beginning to come to terms with the inevitability of growing up and the complexities of human relationships. The novel's open-ended conclusion leaves readers with a sense of ambiguity about Holden's fate. While there are no clear answers about his recovery or future, the final pages suggest that Holden's journey towards self-understanding is ongoing. Themes and motifs, alienation and isolation. One of the central themes of The Catcher in the Rye is Holden's profound sense of alienation from the world around him. Throughout the novel, he feels disconnected from his peers, his family, and society as a whole. His constant use of the word phony to describe others reflects his belief that the adult world is filled with insincerity and hypocrisy. Holden's alienation is both a defense mechanism and a source of deep pain, as he longs for connection but is unable to find it. His inability to form meaningful relationships is further compounded by his grief over Ali's death, which has left him emotionally stunted and unable to move forward. Holden's alienation is not just from others, but also from himself. He struggles with his identity and his place in the world, often feeling lost and directionless. Innocence and the fear of growing up. Holden's desire to protect the innocence of children is one of the driving forces behind his actions throughout the novel. He idealizes childhood as a time of purity and simplicity, and he views adulthood as a world of corruption and compromise. His fantasy of becoming the catcher in the rye reflects his wish to shield children from the harsh realities of life and prevent them from losing their innocence. Holden's fear of growing up is closely tied to his grief over Ali's death. Ali's death represents the loss of innocence, and Holden's inability to cope with this loss drives much of his behavior. His fear of change and his desire to preserve the past prevent him from moving forward and accepting the inevitable process of maturation. Mental health and depression. Holden's erratic behavior, impulsivity, and emotional instability throughout the novel suggest that he is struggling with depression and trauma. His fixation on death, his inability to connect with others, and his constant sense of alienation all point to underlying mental health issues. The novel does not provide a formal diagnosis for Holden, but his symptoms, such as his feelings of worthlessness, his inability to concentrate, and his thoughts of running away, are consistent with depression. Holden's mental health is further complicated by his grief over Ali's death, which he has never fully processed. His breakdown at the end of the novel is the culmination of his internal struggles, and his institutionalization suggests that he is in need of professional help to address his emotional and psychological issues. Conclusion. The Catcher in the Rye is a powerful exploration of the struggles of adolescence, capturing the confusion, alienation, and emotional turbulence that often accompany the transition from childhood to adulthood. Holden Caulfield's voice remains one of the most memorable in modern literature, and his story resonates with readers who have experienced similar feelings of disconnection and longing for authenticity. The novel's themes of innocence, alienation, and mental health continue to be relevant today, as young people navigate the complexities of identity and the pressures of societal expectations. The Catcher in the Rye is not just a story about one boy's journey through New York City. It is a timeless meditation on the challenges of growing up and the search for meaning in an often confusing and overwhelming world. While the novel does not provide easy answers or resolutions, its enduring appeal lies in its ability to capture the raw and unfiltered emotions of adolescence. Holden's story is one of pain, loss, and ultimately, a glimmer of hope as he begins to confront the realities of his life. Through its exploration of the human condition, The Catcher in the Rye remains a touchstone for readers seeking to understand the complexities of youth and the universal quest for authenticity in an imperfect world. Created for Squeeze That Book channel, please subscribe to follow new videos and leave a comment with your thoughts about the book.